Hi, we're Brian, Marisha, and Klaus. We just spent 2 months overlanding Mexico's Baja Peninsula. We learned a lot, so we're giving you everything we learned in one place. This is video 7 in a one-stop series of all things Baja. We've already covered route planning and maps, vehicle prep, packing. Today we're covering border crossing, then gas and water, roads, on and off-road, off-grid camping, and much, much more, including some of our favorite and not so favorite things. Hey guys, welcome back. We're still in our All Things Baja series. Today talking about border crossings and all things you need to know to get into Mexico, Baja in particular.
Fire away then, Maurice. Let's get this rolling.
Okay, what you'll need is passport, which is pretty obvious, and make sure you make copies of it. We had each our passports, but then made, I think, 2 photocopies of each, just to have, for whatever reason. In case you lose one, it's just easier to get a renewal if you have copies. Your driver's license, and we also made laminated copies of those as well. And the reason we had that, in case you lose them, but sometimes if you get pulled over and cops want you to hand over your driver's license.
Policia, Maurice.
The policia might want you to hand over your driver's license, and they may or may not want to hold it till you pay a fine. Give them the laminated copies.
Then they won't have your original.
Yeah.
So if they disappear and say, oh, you got to meet us at the police station and those types of things.
Yeah.
We've just heard stories about that. We didn't have any problems with any police at all.
No.
When we were in Baja for 2 months, we've seen where the police will pull you over, they want to take your driver's license, and then to force you to pay whatever the fines are, etc. And so you could give them a laminated one that you've made. A lot of times they're not going to know what the original, which one's original and which one's not.
Do a good job.
Yeah.
I made ours. They were great. The thing you'll need to cross the border is Mexican auto insurance. That is a must. Your auto insurance in the US or wherever you're from will not be covered in Mexico, so you have to have Mexican auto insurance. We used Baja Bound. We got a 6-month policy, and how they rate that is the length of your policy and the value of your vehicle. Make sure you have a copy of the registration of your vehicle or the title if you own it. If you do not own it, you do need a permission letter from your lender. They may or may not ask for it, but I think it'll make your border crossing process go a lot smoother if you do have one. Next thing you'll need is, if you plan on crossing from Baja into mainland Mexico, you're going to need what's called a TIP, which is a temporary import permit for your vehicle. You do not need one of those in Baja at all, no matter how long you're staying, but if you do plan on going on into the mainland, you need one over there. Yeah,
so you got to think about as you plan your trip, if you're going to go into Mexico and Baja and then go over, take a ferry over to mainland, then you need to plan out what you need for mainland, because this all gets checked off at the border crossing when you come in. So if you travel south to the tip of Baja and then you cross over, you'd have to go all the way back to the border to get some of the documents you would need for mainland. They are different. The key is that there are documents that you will need for mainland that you do not necessarily need for Baja.
What you will need for both mainland or Baja to cross the border is an FNM tourist card, and that's kind of like your tourist visa. And if you're staying for more than 7 days, you need it. If you're staying for under 7 days, you do not need that at all.
Yeah, and that does need to get signed off at the border.
Yeah, you need
so
a stamp.
You don't just have a document that you printed off and then you just carry with you. You actually have to get it signed off at the border when you cross.
Yes, and you can pick up the FNM card at the border, or you can buy it and download it online at home and then just get it stamped. I suggest that because you may or may not get an office that's open, which is what happened to us. So we did cross the border with an FNM card, went to Mexicali 1, and there was no office there. We'll show you kind of our process of how we drove through there. We didn't even get stopped or talked to by anyone.
We didn't talk to one person, we just drove straight over.
Yeah. Well, we're in Mexico, and we're not really sure what happened. We just drove through a gate.
It's the weirdest thing.
What?
We just drove through. Did anyone stop you? Yeah, but how aren't we supposed to get stuff stamped?
We gotta find out where we gotta get stamped. That's the
Yeah. You do have to get that stamped, and the only place you can get it stamped is at the border. Well, that office was either closed or non-existent, so we had to actually drive all the way to Mexicali 2, sorry. Waited in a ridiculously long line.
Sure, you had to wait in the line like we were leaving the country to get to the offices at the borders.
We're in line. Cruise through the border. No problem. Now we're in line at another border to get our FNM card stamped.
So we came over super fast, and then it ended up taking 2.5 hours to go over. Then the dude was not at his desk, and then no one knew if he was going to be coming back or not. So we just ended up doing our trip without getting it signed off on, which I would not recommend.
If you do get stopped and you don't have it stamped, even if you're way south, they'll send you all the way back to the border. So make sure you try your best to get that stamped.
No one asked for ours at all while we were down there, just as a FYI. And so it never came up, so it was not a problem. Doesn't mean it won't come up.
Yeah. Just check the websites for the latest updates before you go in case things do or don't change and what they will or won't need, but that's our advice because I'm sure it changes pretty often. Besides what you will need for your vehicle, we would also suggest checking with current rules and regulations of what plants and foods you will be able to bring across the border, as well as any information if you are bringing a pet. And the last thing that you'll need to cross the border that may or may not pertain to you is if you're bringing a pet over, they do require a current rabies certificate. They used to, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't require a vet health certificate. At the time we went over, they were not asking for them, but we got one anyway, just in case, because we've heard stories that sometimes border guards and checkpoints will ask for it. Again, we didn't get asked for any of that, but we had one anyway, just in case.
Yeah, it's not very consistent. So everyone's experience is going to be different. So I guess my advice would be figure out everything you could possibly need and just have all of that. And you may go through the whole trip and all the checkpoints and you may never show anyone anything, but it's nice to have it if you need it.
Yeah.
Because it's not easy getting those forms.
A few more things you should have with you, not necessary, but that we found helpful to have crossing the border, is we brought down some pesos, Mexican cash with us before we went, and then we had just a little stash of US dollars, kind of emergency money. Our embassy's phone number, and probably should register with your embassy. We didn't.
It's smart to do.
We talked about doing it, we never did it, but something you should probably do. If you don't have Mexico phone service on your current provider, I would suggest getting a local SIM card, a few local SIM cards, so that you can make calls, emergency calls, use your GPS, get on the internet.
You can make phone calls, you
Yeah.
can send texts,
Yes.
but data flow is extremely throttled
Yeah.
on AT&T.
Yeah.
But we did not have a problem with the GPS. But if you plan on doing social media on an AT&T Mexico plan, ain't gonna happen.
Get a SIM card.
Ain't gonna happen. And when you do get those SIM cards, it does change your phone number, so keep that in mind.
Oh, and then one last thing that we tend to do on every international trip we do is make sure you inform your bank that you're traveling, and we'll be using credit cards and or debit cards, both, because it's happened to us before where we've gone to another country, we've made one or two purchases, and then our cards get shut off, and then you may or may not have phone service at the time, and so just another thing to add to your checklist of things to do before you go.
You're doing great, Maurice.
Thanks. I think that's it as far as just what you need to kind of plan and prep and cross the border. And in our next video, we're going to cover kind of the things we learned and or needed or used once you cross the border. So fuel, water, camping, roads. Let's say for border crossing, we're good to go. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, have fun planning.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Adventure is calling.